What's going on, everybody? Welcome into the Detroit Lions podcast. I'm your host, Russell Brown, and with me, as always, Scott Bishoff. Scott, how are you, my friend?
I'm good. Good. I'm doing well. How are you doing?
I'm doing wonderful. I mean, it's always good when we're able to record another episode of Bishoff and Brown here with the Detroit Lions podcast, which you guys are probably watching right now on YouTube, or maybe you're listening to it on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get your streaming podcasts and on those platforms. But you guys can, of course, subscribe to the show at Detroit Lions Podcast on all platforms. So be sure to check that out and be sure to smash that follow button. And again, rate, review, and subscribe to the show. But we're back off the bye week. We did a show last week. We talked about the Raiders. We put the bow on that. We didn't preview the Chargers yet, so we're going to do that tonight. We had a little fun NFL draft topic last week, so that was fun. You can check that one out. You can also check out the other ones, like I said, on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. But tonight, we're also going to throw in the NFC North. We just want to have a little brief discussion through the halfway mark. Who maybe is a threat? We got to talk Josh Dobbs. I mean, he's the topic of discussion right now. So I think we'll talk briefly about him, and then we'll jump into the Chargers game, which is a very fun matchup to preview. So, I mean, let's just jump right into the NFC North and really what we think of this division right now. The Vikings are right behind the Lions, and, a team that maybe looked like they were going to be done for. Maybe they're going to hang around and compete a little bit. They're 5-4. The Packers are 3-5, and the Bears are 2-7. But let's start with Josh Dobbs. Let's start with the Vikings. The takeaway from the game against Atlanta, the guy had no practice time. Bring them back into the mix and gets them the win. Did you watch this game? What was your take from this game? And really, what's your thought on Josh Dobbs? I mean, is he a quality backup QB right now? I think so.
Yeah, he is for sure. He's super, super smart. So,
rocket science.
Some of us are just gifted that way.
Yeah. You and your people over there.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I'm just kidding. No, he is he's a very smart dude. It was very compelling to watch that and to watch it play out, knowing how, you hear do you remember back in the draft process when Will Levis was able to repeat the verbiage of a play call and how you just kind of roll your eyes at, oh my God, you remember the play call? Okay, cool. But hidden in that stuff is how complicated all that shit really is. Mm-hmm. Some parts of a play call have to do with the way you want the line to block things and what they need to know to do. And then it's, anybody attached to the line, how are they helping? And then it's, what are the receivers doing? And what are the progressions and all that stuff? So all that stuff, if you've been in and around if he had been with the Vikings for a few weeks, he would know it. But the fact that they were making that happen on the fly, and it's not just Dobbs either. It's like, think about Kevin O'Connell and all of the offensive staff able to pull that off. Like, hey, I need you to say this string of words to your teammates in the huddle.
Yeah.
And as soon as you're done, I'll tell you what all that shit means.
Exactly.
Right. And I just thought it was ridiculous. Now, I don't think he played great. He didn't need to. But still, the story is going to be one of those stories that in 10 or 15 years, it's going to be, he's a legend for that stuff. And then obviously the long run, just silly. He turned down an easy touchdown throw, I think, to Hawkinson on that play.
Mm-hmm.
But still, it's remarkable. Anytime a team like the Vikings, and I don't think they have a very good defense. So even last year, I thought they were a bit of a fraudulent team going into the playoffs, and it wasn't a great time for a team like the Giants to then beat them in the playoffs to give them some hope as to all right, that's not what you really are kind of thing.
Right.
But I don't know that any of these teams are like a total threat to where the Lions are. But hey, they're 5-4, and Dobbs is very capable. They have lots of weapons. Addison's turned out to be a really good rookie wide receiver. You have Justin Jefferson. They just opened the window on him returning today, I believe. KJ Osborne is there. Hawkinson's there. They're not running the ball well at all. And I think they're really deficient on defense, but that team deserves some level of respect because they can score.
Yeah.
At a high level. And if Dobbs plays at a reasonable level for them, they'll be fine offensively.
Yeah. And I think that's why I wanted to have this conversation, because like, he hasn't been awful. Like, he's not great by any means, but he hasn't been like, oh man, like this guy shouldn't be playing at all. Like, he is a feasible backup for them. And I just wonder with Josh Dobbs, if a team would have invested in him and put time to build him and maybe put weapons around him, would he be starting at some point by now? Would he have been starting sooner? I feel like he would have been, just because of what he's been able to do just the last 14 months. I mean, he's played for 4 different teams in 14 months. That is remarkable. And that's not because he's a terrible football player. He's a smart dude, and teams understand that he might be able to fill the void for a couple of games. And then once they don't need that, they go ahead with the rookie starter or a veteran starter, whatever they need for that particular time. And that's what we're seeing. I mean, he went to Cleveland. He sat behind a suspended Deshaun Watson. He then goes to Tennessee. He plays behind Ryan Tannehill. He then gets out of there and he goes to Detroit for a little bit, and he was out of here. And then I think he went to Tennessee. Then he goes to Arizona, and we saw what he did. And like, that's just a bad football team. It's not just strictly on him. And then he goes to Minnesota, and 3 days later, he wins a football game for him. Like, it's remarkable what he's been able to do. And people forget, the start of his career, he sat behind Ben Roethlisberger. Like, that's a Hall of Fame quarterback he was behind. So
yeah, I think you've nailed it as far as being like a quality backup. Is he a guy who's going to carry a team as a starter who's a difference maker? No.
Right.
But I can think of a whole lot worse players that you could have in a variety of ways as a backup. Just his football savvy, his football intelligence, and then what kind of a teammate he is and what kind of a person he is. It's exactly the kind of person that you'd want to have in a position to back up your starting quarterback. Exactly. So if anything comes out of this for him, and I hope for him, it's that he gets signed to a relatively good deal,
right?
For some good term to be a backup somewhere. I mean, obviously, for him, it'd be better if he started somewhere.
Yeah.
Because I think he could play, but big picture, great backup, a dude who should be who you should prioritize if you're a Lions fan right now, do you want Teddy Bridgewater or Josh Dobbs? Great question. So it's give him his credit. I mean, he deserves it. Yeah. I thought he played pretty well in Arizona. That was a tell that they were so willing to just move on from him with Kyler Murray returning. Mm-hmm. I didn't know that they were going to. I didn't certain that they were. So
yeah. And I just wonder with Dobbs too, like, does he go in a couple of years? Is it the Geno Smith thing, right? Like, where he's a backup, he's just not very good right now, and then all of a sudden it starts clicking. Is that time now? Is it the right spot for him with Kevin O'Connell and that team? And I just wonder. I mean, I think it's noteworthy because it's the Minnesota Vikings. If he was playing for the Cleveland Browns or the Carolina Panthers, I don't think I'd be having this conversation right now. But because it's in the division, it's worth having the conversation because it just is. And they're 5-4, and if he gets them on a roll, I'm glad we're playing them at the end of the year rather than right now, because I don't know how it would turn out. I mean, I'm not saying Josh Dobbs is going to become Pat Mahomes 2.0 or be an MVP, but it just makes you wonder. So I don't know. 5-4 Viking team. We play them the last 2 out of 3 games at the end of the season. We'll see. I mean, that could be for all the marbles. I mean, they're not out of it yet. The Vikings are not completely out yet. And maybe Minnesota's the ideal spot for him in the future because Kirk Cousins is coming back from a torn Achilles, and he's got to figure out his contract. So maybe they go.
Yeah, and the interesting thing there too is if you're Minnesota, and I'm pretty sure I know where you're gonna land on this because you're a draft guy, so I know where you're gonna land on it. if you're Minnesota, do you take the opportunity after Cousins gets hurt to mail in the rest of the season and get yourself a quarterback in the draft? And the answer for me, if I were that GM, would be,
yeah, oh
yes, let's. And
Michael
but
Penix.
this is hard though. It's easy to say that in a vacuum without having any other information.
Yeah,
but it probably would be tough to walk into a locker room every day knowing that these guys are busting their ass and how much work they put in, and a lot of them have bonuses and all these things that they may not meet because you're mailing it in to get a better quarterback for next year. That's tough. So, having said that, I'd still do it. I'm in my office saying this shit. So it's like, I don't know anybody any explanations, but you know what I'm saying? Like, this would have been a really nice opportunity for them just to say, all right, we're going to be in the top 6 or 7 and we're going to get a JJ McCarthy.
Right.
And we're going to be able to reload our offense, and it's going to fix some of our financial issues and that kind of stuff. Dobbs is the opposite. Dobbs is going to win them games. Yep. He's going to put them in games. So,
and again, he did beat an Atlanta Falcon team with a terrible head coach, a bozo of a head coach in Arthur Smith. I mean, it just is what it is. The guy's a clown. He looks like a wannabe super trooper with his stupid mustache. I can't stand Arthur Smith.
Did you see what he did today?
What did he do? Shave his mustache?
I think he shaved his mustache, but he gave like a 5-minute word salad-y answer about why Bijan's not getting carries in the red zone. And it's literally like, okay, every single person who listened to him, you don't even need to listen to what he said. Just trust me. Everybody listening is dumber for having heard it.
Oh my gosh. He's like, such a clown, that guy.
Yeah. And it's like, dude, come on, but yeah. I mean, they beat Atlanta, but still, Atlanta's a reasonable team. It's just, this is one of those things with Minnesota and where the Lions are in the North. Like, you don't want to have to contend with that. You don't want to deal with a team that's winning a bunch of games, especially a talented team on offense like that. Like,
right.
No, they're winning games without Justin Jefferson. That's kind of scary.
I know. And that's what I'm getting at. It's like they're going to hang around. They're going to make it competitive. And at the end of the year, I don't think they're going to be an easy out. I really don't, unless Dobbs goes down. If Dobbs goes down, then I think it's a different conversation. But they still have the weapons. They have the firepower offensively. And Brian Flores can cook a defense together with whatever. I think it'll be fine. And, to the draft point, earlier this week, I had the thought, or earlier last week, I was like, man, I wonder what this team would look like with Michael Penix. You know what I mean? Like, man, that would be a fun offense in Minnesota. And maybe that's the route they go, with Dobbs as the veteran for a year or two, and then they have Michael Penix waiting in the wings.
There's a lot of, like, Bo Nix.
Yeah.
I think they'll be picking in range. I mean, this is going to be the really one of the more interesting drafts in a long time, just because, and we don't know which quarterbacks are in the draft yet, but Penix will be, Bo Nix will be. I mean, they're both like in their 40s at this point, right? Like, it feels like it. I mean, I think that, those two are in, that I would think Caleb Williams is in. May's got to be, you know what I mean? Like, so there's quarterbacks all over the place. It's going to be really interesting to see how that whole thing plays itself out.
Oh, for sure. And again, it'll be something that we talk about in the offseason.
A lot.
Oh yeah, a lot. But moving to the next team, the Packers and Bears, we can probably sum them both up fairly quickly, specifically the Bears. Here's my thought on the Bears. Fuck the Bears. To the Packers, I mean, they just can't get out of their own way. I think that they would be a decent team if Matt LaFleur could call a game better. He just does not call the game right in the first half. Jordan Love can't get out of his own way with some of the mistakes. He holds onto the football too long. I don't like their wide receivers. I thought I was going to like their wide receivers, but Christian Watson's kind of a dud. Romeo Dobbs is up and down, and Jaden Reed's a rookie. So it's like, we'll see. I think he has potential, but
Musgraves played pretty well for a rookie tight end. I will own I thought Love would be much further along and would be playing at a much higher level than he is. Mm-hmm. To the point where I worried about it. in the offseason. Like, generally speaking, teams don't move on from Brett Favre unless they know they've got somebody to replace Brett Favre, and that's Aaron Rodgers. And a team's not going to move on from Aaron Rodgers unless they know they have something, and that's Jordan Love. And that's kind of, you know what I mean? Like, teams just don't walk away from dudes who could still play. I know Aaron Rodgers is a complicated dude, so there was some of that there. Mm-hmm. I just thought Love would play at a higher level than he has, and he's really limited their offense. I mean, really, it's problematic. And then, I don't know that they have not gotten in a rhythm running the ball either. And you have talent. Maybe talented's not the right word for like Dylan. Dylan's just a big guy who's a big, heavy, build up speed runner. I think Aaron Jones is a really good player.
Yes.
But they just haven't seemed to be able to get in rhythm and just feeling it on offense. And whether that's Love stunting them or play calling, combination of both, offensive line issues, young receivers who haven't progressed. Maybe it's all of those things. But right now, I just wouldn't look at Green Bay as a team that you have to worry so much about. They have a lot of issues. So,
no, they do. And a lot of it starts up front too, offensive line wise. And you mentioned the run game. It's a great point. I mean, and when you tie in the offensive line, you tie in that A.J. Dillon's just kind of a guy. He shouldn't be a guy that gets you 15 to 20 carries a game. He's one of those guys that probably gets you 5 to 8. And then ultimately Aaron Jones was out with that hamstring, and they eased him back in 2 weeks ago. He got involved this past week, and it just kind of feels odd. Like they beat the Rams 20-3, but like it felt like it could have been more. And I think that's what it boils down to is it feels like the Packers could be more. It feels like they could be 5-3 rather than 3-5. But players like Jordan Love and the health of a running back and certain players defensively and offensive line wise, and even the head coach, I just wonder if those players are bought into Matt LaFleur completely. It just doesn't feel like it. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong. I'm on the outside looking in, but
no, I think you're 100% right. They're not.
It just doesn't feel like it. It looks like it just, I don't know. And I wasn't the biggest Jordan Love fan either coming out. He wasn't my cup of tea, and it kind of terrifies me because when I watch Jordan Travis, I'm like, man, is this Jordan Love 2.0? Like, I'm not trying to compare the Jordans here, but kind of replicated like styles of play here. I don't know. We'll see. But yeah, I don't know. Jordan Love's just interesting. And you're right. You don't move on from Favre or Rodgers if you don't have somebody. And they did. So it's kind of surprising that he hasn't been the guy. But maybe he turns around in the second half of the season.
Maybe. But to this point, it's very underwhelming what they're doing.
Yeah, it is.
We're good.
Right, which we're fine with. And then underwhelming, the Bears. Justin Fields will be back when he plays us. I don't think he'll be back this week for Carolina, but when he plays us, I think he'll be back. I don't know if you agree with that, but that's what I
think he's listed as doubtful for this week. But and the legs are a problem. You gotta pressure. He's gonna hold the ball for a long time. He's gonna put it into a dangerous place here or there. Yeah. But it's just a matter of how do you mitigate his running and just kind of force him to beat you as a quarterback. The Lions did that pretty well last year, even though they gave up huge plays to him. So, interesting games coming up, but, DJ Moore's been good there, but, and then we talked last week, about the trade deadline stuff and some of the confusing, timing behind the Montez Sweat trade and extension. And especially if you're moving on from Fields, which they could easily do in this off season, it's an interesting, what the Bears are doing is interesting and not necessarily in a good way.
Right.
As far as figuring out what to do, team wise, but we're also good with that too. So
yeah,
cool.
Yeah, no, and I mean, they're behind the 8 ball completely. They're 2-7. It's going to be a tough stretch for them to even really be competitive. I think we don't have to worry about them too much when it comes to the division. And that's really what it boils down to. The Lions are in the driver's seat for the first division title since 93. We're not going to go over what we were doing back in 93 because I know what I was doing. And you probably had hair then, so it was different.
Hey.
I'm sorry, I had to throw that in there. But
That's good.
We'll jump to the preview here. Chargers on the schedule this week, 4:00, SoFi Stadium on the road. You brought up a great point before the show of the Lions not winning on the road in the West Coast in some time, or they haven't played on the road, excuse me, in the West Coast in some time. And we went back to 2021 and like you mentioned Kansas City to start the year, but you go back to 21, they played the Rams, they played the Seahawks, not great games. I mean, you told me you're nervous about this game. What makes you nervous? Is it the West Coast thing?
So I'm not nervous, and I don't want to call it a trap game or anything. And it's nothing like that. It's just the Lions haven't traveled. They haven't had to travel. So yeah, I racked my brain and it's not like that's a big job, but like, I thought about it for a while. Like, when's the last time they went out and they played in California or out, way out west?
Yeah.
And it was the 2021 season. And to me, there's like that's a different team than what we had, what the Lions had last year. And it's just like, okay, so for 1.5 seasons, the entire 2022-23 season, and through 8 games and the bye week this year, the Lions really haven't had to travel a long distance like that. And some teams travel well and some teams don't. Obviously, they went to Kansas City and they won in week 1. They went to Dallas. I want to say Dallas was last year. It was a loss, but still, there's a little travel involved there. But it's just the unknown of they haven't been an East Coast, an East Coast Eastern time zone team traveling out to play, in California in a few years. And I just don't know. There's some unknown there. Mm-hmm. Now, I'm not nervous about the matchup. I mean, it's you mentioned it earlier, and I think it's the perfect way to put it. It's an exciting matchup. Like, this is going to be a fun game to watch. The Chargers are a fun team. They have talent all over the place. It's between Justin Herbert, Austin Eckler. You have Keenan Allen. I know that they're without Mike Williams, and that's a big deal right now. Quentin Johnston is just not.
He's not Jordan Addison.
It's been kind of rough, right? So,
yep.
But Rashawn Slater's there. They have good pieces all over the place. And then on defense, you have Joey Bosa. You have Derwin James. They have dudes, but their defense is underperforming, and it's confusing. You have a very defensive-minded head coach, and their defense is not very good.
Yeah.
It's a little bit like the Arthur Smith conversation. He's a run game coordinator. That's kind of what he does, and their running game's not very good right now. What are you doing? So I do think the Lions are in they have pretty serious advantages over the Chargers. The Lions are playing really well. But coming off the bye, traveling out there, that kind of stuff. And it's, in the end, I think that can you keep Justin Herbert looking out of sorts a little? Because he has looked, I don't know how much you've seen of them, but he just looks out of sorts. The offense looks out of rhythm. They don't look comfortable. He doesn't look comfortable. And so keep pressuring him. So I don't know, maybe that means a little bit more of the kind of blitzing they did against the Raiders, where you brought a lot of linebacker pressure, right? And you just made it so he can't sit back there and pick you apart.
Yeah.
And I would, so there's the two ways that they have done things, which is playing lots of contain and not necessarily trying to get home and dropping a bunch of guys in the coverage, as opposed to being super aggressive and getting after a quarterback and making him feel uncomfortable. And I kind of hope they get after Herbert and make it so that he's not comfortable in this game, and not let him just pick them apart on defense. But, I think the Lions come into this healthy. The Chargers do too. So super exciting matchup. I think this could be there could be a lot of points in this game.
Yes.
I don't know what the over-under is. I don't know, any of that stuff, or what the implied numbers or any of those things, but I would expect Vegas to think this is a bit of a higher scoring game.
Yeah, it's Vegas has got it at a 3-point spread, and the over-under is 48.5. The next closest was Broncos-Bills on Monday night at 47 points, and the Texans-Bengals was 47.5. So this is the highest total of the weekend.
Yeah.
And I think it's interesting because I'm with you in a sense, like it's always nerve-wracking. Every game is nerve-wracking in a sense, and it's one of those, like it's exciting, and you don't want to say the word trap, but it does, like things do feel trappy at times, especially when you consider the situation. You're going to the West Coast, you're playing out there for the first time, really that far west since 2021.
Yeah.
But at the same time, 2021 was a completely different team as it is now. And I just will say this. The Chargers have won 2 in a row, but they beat a bad Bears team with that Tyson Bagnet in his first start, and they just played the Jets, who if the Jets had a quarterback, man, they would have beat the Chargers. It just is what it is. Like they would have beat them. And that defense played well. They sacked Herbert like 6 times. And I will say it does worry me a little bit having to worry about Bosa and Khalil Mack and that Tuli Tuipulotu kid from USC up the middle. He's played really well, but I don't know, man. It's a 3-point spread for a reason, and I think Vegas knows that. Vegas just knows, man. And like the Lions are going to come in, and it might only be a 3-point game, but I just got a hunch that the Lions are going to come in and they're going to do their jobs like they've been doing. They get everybody back: Jonah Jackson, Frank Ragnow, David Montgomery's back. It's exciting. And I think this offense is going to be able to operate fully for the first time.
Do you feel like the Lions have played a complete game? I mean, I think they did against Kansas City-ish.
Yeah.
But, I mean, I know that they waxed Carolina.
Right.
And you beat Tampa. But you haven't played great in those games.
Yeah. I mean, Green Bay, I would say they played I would say that was a complete game, right? I mean,
the first half was as dominant. Yeah.
Yeah, I would say that game is a pretty good example, but I mean, no, you're probably right. I mean, some of the games you're just beating up on some bad teams, but you still got to beat up on those teams. Like they deserve the beating. They got to take it, and you got to give it. And I think it's one of these types of games. I don't know that going into this show, you're making me reconsider everything. But going into this, I look at the Chargers. I just don't think they're that good, and maybe I'm overthinking it, but I watched the Bears game because the last 2 games for them have been prime time. And I watched the Bears game. I broke it down. I watched the Jets game. Haven't broken that game down yet. A lot of the quick passing game stuff that we saw from Justin Herbert coming out of Oregon, which I thought was going to be his Achilles heel, and it opened up the deep passing game. But now that Mike Williams, like you mentioned, is done for the year with the torn ACL, they don't have that deep threat anymore. So everything is really underneath. It's Keenan Allen on crossers. It's wide receiver screens to Quentin Johnston because there's a misconception with Johnston. I mean, he's 6'4", 215. He runs like the wind blows, but he doesn't create separation. And his biggest asset coming out of TCU was that he was a big, fast receiver that could run those wide receiver screens. But he didn't always have
it. He needs manufactured touches, and he's a finesse. He's a small player in a big man's body.
Yeah, I think the biggest threats outside of Keenan Allen are Gerald Everett. Once he gets going, he's pretty tough to bring down, and he's consistent with like stick routes and things in the middle. And then obviously you just have to honor Austin Eckler, but they don't run the ball very well. And the Lions, even if they did, the Lions stopped the run. So now you're one-dimensional, and the Lions have been phenomenal in pursuit with Alex Anzalone, Jack Campbell, Brian Branch. So like, I don't know. I just look at it, and I if they can get some type of a pass rush and Hutch can get out of this stretch of not getting a sack, I think they're going to be just fine. I really do. And I think that 3-point spread is really telling on the road for the first time since 2021 this far west. I think Vegas is backing them because they know they're an elite team. And when you look at offensive analytics, the Lions are up there with the Bills and Eagles for elite offenses in the league, and the Chargers aren't there. So I think...
Yeah, no, I'm aboard. I'm totally on board with that same stuff. Like just neutral field, I think, the Lions are in a great position both offensively and defensively in this game. I mean, but it's not a neutral field. So it's like, the travel thing is a thing. How much? I hope it's not a thing. I hope we giggle at it next week.
Right.
But I do think the Lions are in a nice position. They should be able to get pressure on Herbert. They really should. And then it's do you bracket Keenan Allen? What do you do? What do you do there? What you know what I mean? Like, how do you try to limit him, prevent him from just 12 catches for 150 yards and a touchdown kind of thing?
Right.
Eckler's another story. Like he's a really good player. He's a very if you're a fantasy football player, this is a dream matchup, right? This should be one of those. There's going to be somebody who goes off in this game. Who is it going to be? I don't know. But Laporta could have a really good game here.
Yeah, coming back from Jeff. Yeah, he should. And then
should. You get Montgomery back. You've got Gibbs rolling. Amon-Ra's ready to go. Like there's just, I feel good about it in every way.
Yeah,
it's just the travel. That's all.
No, I get it.
I think they're in a good place. I do. It's gonna be a fun game.
Absolutely. I will say, you talk about the weapons. You bring up every great point as far as all the players. Kind of feels like a JMO spot, right? Like, is this one of those spots? And we talked about it a few weeks ago, and he had the touchdown, and then obviously he had the bad game against Baltimore. But like, you got the weapons all on the field now. Does he break free finally? And does Goff hit him in stride? And does it work? I mean, he could have scored against the Raiders on a crossing route that we talked about, and he fell, but ultimately I think the receiver got in his way, his teammate got in his way. Because I rewatched that. I rewatched that interception again, and I think you're right. I don't think Goff got enough as he was trying to throw that one away. So I think if they can eliminate some of those little mistakes, I think they're going to have a big day. And I don't know. I'll probably be rolling to Lions -3 with my bet slip at Russ NFL Draft on Twitter. So you can go ahead and check those out and ride the bet with me. But yeah, I don't know. I don't have much else to add. I mean, I think it's a good game. It's a fun game. It should be a game that the Lions win. I feel like it's a must win for Detroit, just simply because when you look ahead, and we take them one day at a time here, but you look ahead, you got 2 divisional games. You got to go to New Orleans. You got to go to Chicago. The 4-game stretch there after this game is not necessarily a cakewalk by any means. It's not completely difficult. It's very winnable, but you still got to go on the road twice. You still got to play divisional teams 3 out of 4 times. So,
well, they all matter too. Is at the end of the season, when we're talking about home playoff games and the ability to not have to go somewhere else, these kind of games are huge.
Yep. So,
if they want to challenge Philly for the number 1 seed, or if they want to lock in the 2 seed, you can't lose this kind of game. This is one. I mean, I know the NFC games are more important, but like these kind of games that you should win, you need to win. And I just think that the Lions play a reasonably good football game. They're fine.
Yep. No, and I think that's the thing too, right? Like their identity is control the clock, long drives. So if they have a couple of 6 or 7 minute drives and get points, even if that means taking field goals, I think they're going to be just fine, because I would be a little surprised if Herbert went down the field every single time he touched the ball. I just would be. I mean, I'm not discrediting him. I like Herbert. He's got a powerful arm. I like their offense for the most part, but they're missing players. Their offensive line is very inconsistent. So,
I mean, I think if Herbert does that, there's an element of the Lions were not able to create any pressure at all. Yeah. And if you can't do that, you're in trouble against almost anybody you play in the NFL. So I think the Lions will generate pressure. They can do it a variety of ways. Against this offensive line, I think you're able to do it conventionally with your 4-man front.
Yep.
I think you could do it blitzing. I think there's a variety of things that you can do to create pressure and to make him uncomfortable. And I do hope we see some of that, because he has looked rattled.
Yeah.
I don't know if it coincides with the destruction of his finger, but it might. And, I mean, pressure is a real thing. It's, when you make these guys uncomfortable, playing quarterback's tough. It's a hard job. It really is.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like, if the Lions can if they can harass Herbert enough to make him uncomfortable and protect Goff enough to let him just play a very settled, comfortable game, again, they should be okay.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And well, I mean, again, we'll see how it all kind of shakes out. I mean, the Chargers are relatively balanced between, what they do offensively, whether it's a short pass or a deep pass. I mean, we'll kind of see. I mean, they don't run a ton of, they run 29% of their plays or play action. So we'll see. I mean, that's fifth most in the NFL. So the Lions kind of got to be prepared for that. And the key is, and the reason they do that is simply because Keenan Allen is so effective with the short area stuff that he can do. So they try to draw those linebackers and open things up. So yeah, I mean, we'll see. I don't know. I don't have anything else to add. We're not going to do score predictions because we don't do that on the show anymore.
Nope. Those days are over.
Yeah. I don't know if you got anything else to add. I'm excited for Sunday. I'd love to know what everybody thinks is going to happen in this game. I would love to talk more on the YouTube comments. So be sure to rate, review, and subscribe to the show here on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, at Detroit Lions Podcast. But do you have anything else to add, my friend?
No, we're good. I think if people want to talk about it, hit us up on Twitter, tag us both into the Twitter conversation. We're good. It's good.
Yeah,
up for that for sure. And make sure that you're tuning into everything that the Detroit Lions Podcast is doing. It's awesome. It's great stuff. So it's good.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, absolutely. And we got to tip the hat to Chris and Jeff for the 24-hour stream they did, which you guys can rewatch that episode. Tons of great guests, Dan Miller, Herman Moore, Scott Bishoff, Russ Brown, so many great guests. It was awesome. And it all went to a good cause. Bunch of money was donated to St. Jude. So great stuff by those guys. And like Scott said, follow everything that we do. I mean, everybody's doing a great job here on the network. So it's been great. We're happy to be a part of it. We're hoping you guys are liking it. So he's Scott Bischoff. I'm Russ Brown. Go Lions, Chargers on Sunday, 4:00. We'll talk to you guys next week. Until next time, this is Bischoff and Brown.